on narrowed and scripted curriculum, specifically in elementary schools. So I'm going to explain sort of what narrow and scripted curriculum are. And my three main points are as follows: narrow curriculum connected to student engagement, scripted curriculum connected to teacher effectiveness, and finally how those two, both narrowed and scripted curriculum, have led to deprofessionalization of teachers in elementary schools. So narrow curriculum is causing a lack of student engagement in elementary schools and excitement about learning. And it's also limiting teachers in the breadth of subjects they can teach. A narrowed curriculum basically just means you teach fewer subjects. And I'll get more into that. It was started with No Child Left Behind in 2001, with a push for standardized tests and higher test scores across the country. And the way that school districts and states responded to that was they decided to only teach the subjects that were being tested on, which were literacy and math, which effectively narrowed the curriculum to those two subjects. So basically, Pope, a researcher here at the Stanford School of Education, confirmed from her research that if it's not tested, it isn't taught. So math and literacy are basically the only two subjects being taught. Now there are exceptions to the rule, but this is a national trend, and many elementary schools are only teaching these two subjects. So subjects like science and social studies, art, music, are effectively dropped from the curriculum. And if teachers have time, they will try to teach these subjects, but ultimately, because of the strictness of their script, which I'll get into later, and the amount of time they have to spend on literacy and math, they don't have time to teach these subjects. And no one is measuring what is being lost when you spend 90% of your day only learning about math and literacy. And that was said by a researcher here at Stanford also, whose name is Ira Litt, and his research plays a big part of my research as well. So it's really unfortunate because subjects that might get students really excited about learning, like science and art and music, are dropped from the curriculum, and so they don't get exposed to these things. So they may be missing out on something that really gets them excited about learning that isn't math and literacy. And according to Pope and Litt, it's not showing my notes. That's really not good. According to Pope and Litt, the rest of these subjects are put on the back burner, and it may turn students off to learning. So my next point is about scripted curriculum lowering teacher effectiveness. So basically, scripted curriculum tells you exactly what to say and what to do for the teachers. And so it's written out, and it's kind of a result of the narrowing of curriculum. So the first point I had, which was narrowing of curriculum, has led to the adoption of a scripted curriculum for teachers, because as like a further effort to increase test scores. And the only way they could think of for doing that, or the main reason they could think of for doing that, was telling the teachers exactly what to teach, which would regiment how they taught and make sure they were teaching exactly to the test. And so teachers have to do exactly what their scripts tell them for each lesson. And so it's written out, and you cannot veer from the text, or from the script. So in many cases, it varies with school district on how strictly they implement the scripted curriculum, but on many cases, teachers, if they're caught veering from their script in any way and adding something to their lesson plan that they're not supposed to, they'll get talked to by their administrator and have to remain with the script. So a case study for this is Keith Farber, who's a third grade teacher at Eagle Rock Elementary School in Eagle Point, Oregon. And he's been teaching for 17 years, and at first when he started out, he didn't have any curriculum, and he had to create all of his own materials. So he learned what was effective in his classroom throughout the years, and what was useful in engaging students. And now that the curriculum is more and more scripted, he says that the results of his teaching have gone down because he can't make his own decisions in his classroom and can't help his own students by knowing what they need specifically that isn't in the script. And this is a big problem because the script is very generalized. Obviously, it's not written for each district or each classroom. It's just written and given out across the country. So it doesn't take into account the needs of individual students. And so students are effectively brought to an average, and teachers can't address the needs of groups of students or individual students. And Mr. Farber had an example of this. He used to have reading groups where he'd have more advanced at students in one reading group and have like different reading groups depending on what students needed to work on in reading, and he could spend time with each different group. However, now that he has a scripted curriculum, he can't do reading groups anymore, so he has to do lessons with the entire class instead of splitting them up into groups and having them work in smaller groups and get more attention. And so he has some students that are bored and some students that are struggling, and he can't really do anything to help either of those groups of students now. And as Pope said, one of the researchers here said, the curriculum moves forward even if students aren't learning. So even if they're struggling or if they're really, really bored, it just goes right ahead. Another problem with scripted curriculum, and Mr. Farber was saying this as well, is you can tell that most of the activities in the script have not been field tested. So they've been written by curriculum writers, but they haven't actually been tested in classrooms, and obviously every classroom is different. And many of the lessons that he has in his script don't work in his classroom because he has different kids than another teacher might have. And they can't, and Mr. Farber also can't adapt the materials to fit his classroom better, so he can't cater to his students, which is a big problem. So if he could take the script and cater it to his classroom, it might work out, but because they can't adapt materials, it isn't working very well at all. And so teachers want to differentiate how students learn because kids learn in different ways, as Pope pointed out, but they aren't able to because of the script. So basically, teachers would like to take the curriculum materials and adapt them to their classroom, or even add something from like the community the school is in, or outside sources, or maybe talk about something that's going on in the community and add that into their lesson plan to make it more relevant and engaging for students. But they can't do that because of the script. So that's another big downfall of scripted curriculum. So my third point is deprofessionalization of teachers. So the first 2 points, both narrow curriculum and scripted curriculum, have led to the deprofessionalization of teachers, mainly because they don't allow teachers to teach effectively. They don't allow teachers to use their developed pedagogy. They just require them to read from a book and read from a script. And teachers can't really use their skills as a teacher to teach to their students. And deprofessionalization is kind of spurred by the thought that, in the words of Lit, teachers are replaceable cogs. And so teachers aren't really valued to have their own pedagogical design capacity, so they aren't seen to have to like know their students the best, which is a problem because they spend the most time with their students, but they aren't allowed to help their students the most because the script is dictating what they say and what they do. And the narrow curriculum obviously only allows them to teach 2 subjects, so even if they think their students might be really engaged with more subjects, they can't add that to their lesson plans. So teachers who should be able to make their own decisions in the classroom and add material and adapt materials to their classroom can't make those decisions. So basically, narrowed and scripted curriculum are leading to the deprofessionalization of teachers within the last decade, and it's a trend that should not continue, in my opinion, and from the researchers I've talked to, they also think it's a very bad thing to continue. And a thing that might help in the future is a new curriculum called Common Core, which is being implemented, which is less of a script, so we'll see how that works. But ultimately, the biggest takeaway I want you guys to have is that both scripted and narrow curriculum are not helpful to either teachers or students, and it's causing a deprofessionalization of teachers.
Thanks, Amelia.